My name's Kev Murray. I'm the Zuhlke's new regional director for the North. And part of my remit in looking after Zuhlke in the North is delivery governance for all our northern projects. So can I just get a quick show of hands? Who here is actually involved in day-to-day delivery, or as a developer, as a project manager, actually in delivery projects? Is it a lot of people there? Okay. Who wakes up every morning and thinks, yes, I've got to do some governance today? So I wrote this presentation last year as a consequence of realising that I don't really have any peers or any agile heroes or any books to actually help me on my journey with agile delivery governance. There's not much out there. So myself and a couple of colleagues actually put together some best practice that we adhere to. One of the biggest problems we have with governance is just the perception. People think that it's red tape, it's bureaucracy, it's slowing us down, it's just stopping us from actually doing our job. And as people who work in agile programs, agile projects, we don't actually help ourselves. So I know what you're thinking. We're 2 slides into an Agile conference and someone's showing the Agile Manifesto already. So I am not a fan of the Agile Manifesto. I think it's out of date. I think it's arrogant. I think the language in the Agile Manifesto doesn't really help us nowadays. 20 years ago, it was really relevant. It was really, really important, and it's more than served a purpose. And it's still valuable, but I think it just needs a little bit updated. People misinterpret it. It doesn't actually get presented properly. You can see, I should have had the mic. There's always a little bit of small print with the Agile Manifesto. Most people perceive this at best to say, we value...
Do you want this mic?
No, we're fine. We value, the items on the left-hand side are much more important than the items on the right-hand side. That's the best perception of it. At worst, people believe the things on the right-hand side are actually not important. That's not true. The small print actually says there is value on the items on the right-hand side. But the way we talk in agile teams, we think that actually customer collaboration beats contract negotiations. That's actually not true. You can have great customer collaboration and spend their money too quickly. That's not a good place to be. We need to make sure that we value customer collaboration and contract negotiations. For me, this is a balance. You know, we want to make sure we understand and care about the things on the left-hand side, but a lot of the governance activities are on the right-hand side. Predictability, roadmaps, visibility, tracking, change control. They're not less important, they're equally as important. And the Agile Manifesto, slightly arrogantly, just needs to be a little bit updated to reflect that. At the time, it was very important what it was trying to achieve. But I think we do need to sort of understand that there's lots of amazing things on the left-hand side. We want to get software out quickly. We want to get feedback loops. We want to do user research. But we actually have to care about doing it in a methodical way. And that's really, really important because digital projects are very, very complex. Is anyone aware of the Cynefin framework? Some people are. The good news is I'm not going to go into detail. I'm actually not clever enough to go into the detail. We don't have enough time. But if you think about these particular, that's a joke, sorry. These areas, digital projects are not complicated or obvious. We have to do analysis, we have to do user research, we have minimum viable products, we deliver code quickly to sense and respond. If you look at the categorization, this is heart surgery. This is actually delivering a digital project. We've got to give it the respect it needs. We've got to care about governance. We've got to care about looking after the projects because, you know, when we do digital projects, they have new domains, new problems, new technology, new people. These all add to the complexity of what we're trying to achieve. Now, there are some governance frameworks out there. I've got a couple of examples of ones that aren't that good. and a couple that are actually really, really good. So this next slide has actually caused me more grief than any other slide that I've presented. So I'll apologise in advance. If anybody is a Prince 2 practitioner, I am actually not having a go at Prince 2. Prince 2 has its purpose, it's good at some things, but it's not particularly good when it comes to governance. It's too focused on the organisation. It's not focused on the individuals. It's not focused on the team. It even says lines of authority. You know, it's hierarchical. It actually doesn't help with governance in agile delivery teams. I'm not having a go at Prince 2, so please, you can come up to me and ask me any questions at any time, but not. However, I am having a go at SAFE. This is awful. So this SAFE diagram is it's too convoluted, it's too hierarchical, it's too confusing. How can the delivery team at the bottom?
At the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. They're at the bottom. You know, where are they getting their governance, their guidance from? Where are the users on this diagram? Where's the user feedback on this diagram? I do appreciate, I think they might be on 4.6, this is 4.5. So what this does possibly help with is it might help you build the thing right. It doesn't help you build the right thing. So it's not all doom and gloom. There is one very, very good framework that I am a massive fanboy of. Who's aware of government digital services here? Okay. So most people haven't actually seen this page. It's probably one of the, in the GDS service manual, it's not one of the most common pages, but to me it's one of the most effective pages. The GDS service manual only has half a dozen pages around governance, but what it says is so powerful, so true, so correct. 6 key principles. First and foremost, don't slow down delivery. That is so important. That's why a lot of people are put off by the perception of governance. Decisions at the right level. That makes a lot of sense, but it's hard. Having the right people in the room or doing it the right people, that's actually not easy either, but we do need to try and make sure we do that. Go and see for yourself, only do it if it adds value, and trust and verify. These are very important key principles. But for me, the best sentence is actually a little bit further down the page. Everyone in the delivery team is responsible for and involved in its governance. If you're doing daily stand-ups, if you're doing retrospectives, if you're doing sprint planning, these are actually governance activities by the team for the team. One thing I forgot to mention, I'll be taking questions at the end, but if anyone wants me to clarify or have a question during, please interrupt at any time. So yeah, this is important because it empowers the team, it brings governance, and a lot of people probably don't realise that by doing the Agile ceremonies, by being involved as part of the team, we are governing ourselves. This book is fantastic. I only started reading it this year. And for me, this is probably the best book on leadership and agile governance out there. I don't know if has anyone heard of this book or read it? Yeah. It's actually about submarines in the 1990s, but it is so relevant to how we deliver projects, how we deliver agile projects. It's uncanny. It's all about empowering a leader culture. And actually, I'm going to talk about that later on, but for me, this is probably the best publication around that relates to agile governance that is out there. And it all boils down to continuous improvement, which is what we're all about in agile delivery teams. It has to have unobtrusive governance evolved by the team, not inflicted upon them. So when I come to conferences like this, I really like presentations where the speaker gives examples, and you think, I'm going to actually do that tomorrow. So what I've done today, I've actually got a list of anti-patterns that if you're doing them, I'd like you to stop doing tomorrow as well. So the next section is all about governance anti-patterns. And this is all born out of my particular experience in talking to my colleagues. So I don't think I've been really unlucky. I think a lot of people actually share a lot of these same experiences. When I first gave this presentation, I wasn't actually sure if it would be interesting enough, so I introduced a little bit of a movie quiz to try and keep people awake. So as my sort of analogies for the types of governance that I'll be going, I'll be asking you a few questions as well. So, does anyone see that movie?
Well, I think I recognise it's Lord of the Flies.
Lord of the Flies, yes. So no governance. So no governance sounds okay, but there's a massive human cost to not introducing governance. People fall out. You know, people's relationships break down in teams. Not having any governance isn't a particularly clever thing to do. You cannot throw a bunch of really clever people in the room and hope they get on with it. I've been on projects that we've done that, and there's still people that I know that are not talking together because of architectural decisions that have no guidance or framework or structure to be made. Also, when you're trying to break new ground, so we were on one particular project that was quite early doors, bringing together agile delivery and creative, and getting an amazing senior creative person and getting somebody that really knew agile together. And I was supposed to be doing the governance but was quite busy, and it was a case of, right, a couple of clever people in the room with the customer, and it turned into chaos. You know, there wasn't any governance, there wasn't any guidance, different views of opinion. So the other way that no governance is a problem is actually if people don't realise they're actually doing the wrong thing. They might be merrily going off on a tangent. So actually having some governance to keep people on the right track is really, really important. Anyone know this film? I want the exact film, not just the series. Oh. So, too much governance. Again, that has a similar human cost. It can be really demoralising, particularly for developers being asked every 5 minutes, are you done yet? Are you done yet? I actually used to be a developer quite a long time ago, and the reason I ended up becoming a project manager was a particular project where our team was getting interrupted by about 4 or 5 different project managers several times a day. So what we actually ended up doing, and people don't realise, by stopping a developer, interrupting them, you make them context switch. So it's not, they don't lose the 2 minutes that you've interrupted them for. A lot of people might lose 15 minutes either side of that conversation. So it's massively demoralising for people because you're getting slowed down. What we did in this situation is we literally circled the wagons, we moved our desks around. I became a bit of a gatekeeper and nobody could actually get past me. And what we were doing, this is back in 2001. So as a team, we would have an early morning meeting before the managers got in. Everyone would give the updates to me and I would give the updates to the customers. We were effectively doing daily stand-ups before we even knew about Scrum. What we also did that was very important as well is the managers would always come up to us and ask, how far are the waiters? What percentage of the way are you through? And we changed that, so they could ask us that, but we wouldn't answer that. We would tell them how many days were left or how many hours were left, not how far we were through. So the task was 2 days and there was 3 days left. That, you know, it wasn't we were 50% of the way through. So that too much governance is probably why I'm standing here and gone down a journey of delivery management. So governance by fear. So this is why I can't do Movember anymore. So the governance by fear is unfortunately far from common. You know, people get scared in particularly hierarchical organisations. One of the key problems with governance by fear is it drives a willingness and an unwillingness to be transparent. People hide the truth. People don't ask for help if they think that they're going to get a bollock. However, it's not always deliberate. I think we need to be very, very mindful that as leaders and as managers, our behaviours, our actions, our demeanour might inadvertently sort of put people off. I got advised that I was actually scaring the customer by the customer on one particular project, because I would come into a meeting, I'd be quite Scottish, I'd talk very quickly, brash, but I would roll my sleeves up at the start of a meeting while I'm talking to people. And apparently, that was quite sinister. So everyone's in the room, and I'm rolling my sleeves up, and they're at the end of an interrogation. So even if you don't mean to be dominating or putting people under pressure, you do need to be mindful. But also, you've got to care about each other. And the sort of, again, the one key theme that's going through all these governance anti-patterns is the human cost, the impact on people. People will leave their jobs, you will lose people. So, yeah, be very mindful of this one. Now, does anybody know the analogy of like a seagull architect or a seagull manager?
Something to do with arm waving.
No, it's somebody who's about 40 feet above you, comes in, dives in, poops on your head and just disappears. So, seagull governance is something that might actually start off with a good intention. And as technology gets better and quicker and faster, the existing governance frameworks that some organisations have get left behind in the wake. Two really good examples where I've actually seen this far too many times are TDAs, or technical design authorities, or change control boards. So people are on the change control board or a TDA. They might meet every 7th Tuesday. You know, that's actually not. That is one particular customer I was with. Or a change control board might be used to delivering code every 6 months, but we can deliver code multiple times a day. So what you find is an organisation that particularly is going through an agile transformation. You have to involve these people from the very outset. What you find is these people get involved when it's too late. They don't get involved until actually we're about to release that first drop of code. And we're not ticking any of the boxes because they're not relevant. So what tends to happen is these people swoop in, stop you and disappear. So we need to be very mindful and find out who these people are and actually make changes. You don't necessarily have to say we don't have a change control board, but you might want to give them advice on how they can involve as well and stay relevant. A technical design authority is still a very good idea, but actually the way that we can scale, the way we can distribute teams, the decisions that we need to make need to be much quicker and much more relevant, and teams need to be very mindful of this. This is my new pet hate, which is blocking governance, governance that none shall pass. It feels like there's no way that can happen, but it happened on one of my projects last year. I won't actually mention the organisation, but as a result of the GDS service standard, so one of the things I really like about GDS, they've actually got a governance framework and the service standard. One particular large government organisation decided that we need to help people be ready to sit the GDS service assessment. That is an amazing idea. So build up a team of people whose job it is to actually help other teams with governance. It failed spectacularly because they became a governance gate in themselves. They actually stopped helping people, or their way of helping people was actually to create another layer of governance that was impossible to pass. We actually bypassed it, got ourselves into a lot of trouble, passed the GDS assessment, and got a retrospective fail and blocked from going live. That's just not very good. Now, we could have handled that better. There was a lot of frustration, a lot of emotions, but we had permission to proceed from GDS, which was the ultimate authority, but we still got blocked. Yeah. So there's a counterpoint to this one, which is another one of the customers I worked with. You know, they don't actually have any of this. The way that they deal with it is their blocking governance is almost like retrospective governance. They can deliver 14 times a day as long as they can back out within minutes. So that they are not a public sector body, they're a private, privately owned organisation. And they have the example where somebody put something that was just a little bit too brave, a little bit too insulting. They didn't get told off because they could put it live, somebody saw it, it got backed out within minutes. So you don't always need to do this. This is the one that really, really grinds me down, is governance by committee. Anyone recognise that film?
How I Fell in Love with the New Queen.
Yeah. So again, this might start off with good intentions. A nice modern agile way of calling it is swarming. That's a great thing to do. You know, you get lots of people, you swarm on the problem, and you disappear as soon as possible. I think there are still managers in a room in Newcastle from EDS managing a project that doesn't exist with this type of thing, because people come into these meetings and they just stay. They stay too long, and what you find is a number of sort of further anti-patterns where the people who can give the best updates are actually really busy trying to solve the problem, so you're taking them away from the work. Or the people that need to make the decisions, they might go for the first couple of sessions, but they're too important, so they send unempowered deputies. And these meetings just go on and on and on. Where this works is where people are able to swarm, fix it, and disappear. But actually, when no one can make a decision, when they just drag on and on and on, it becomes far too of a distraction. Now, apologies for this next slide. It isn't Prince 2, but it is a little bit graphic. But it does serve a purpose. So governance when it's too late. This is far too common, unfortunately. Governance, when it doesn't get respected, when it doesn't get understood. Working closely with GDS in the early days of the exemplars, where this GDS service exemplar was very new to a lot of people, they were really, really fed up of, they've put all this effort into trying to make it effective, trying to make it positive, and people coming in and saying, we're different. Yeah, it doesn't apply to us, we're different. You know, I've seen it, and it's not just with GDS, I've seen it on CMMI projects as well, where people just, there was one particular, this was quite a wee while ago, where there was, in our Microsoft project Gantt chart, we had a 2-week block right at the end to tick all the CMMI level 3 governance boxes. That was probably always the worst 2 weeks of the project's lives. And I wouldn't mind, but nobody actually thought of bringing it forward. So, yeah, governance when it's too late. Respect the governance. Don't go in saying we're different, and don't wait until the end before you actually start to deliver it. So, Agile governance has to be an open, tailored framework of trust to ensure the team succeeds. So the way that I look at governance, the way that Zuhlke looks at governance, is we need to make sure that governance addresses these different areas. The team and delivery management, the product vision. We want to make sure that we're building the thing the right way and we're building the right thing. That is really, really important. We want to make sure that risks are understood and cared about. A lot of people are worried about risks. They don't like having risks. They get brushed under the carpet. We want to make sure that actually, and again, I think this is important, separating technical steering and creative steering, you know, because you can get situations when one can dominate the other. So just having that coupled together with delivery doesn't work. You need to look at delivery, you need to look at technical, you look at creative separately, and we cannot forget commercials as well. The key thing here though is this is not an excuse to turn off the brain. This is not a prescriptive approach. The whole point here is all projects are different. This isn't a recipe book or a tick list. You've actually got to do some hard thinking about your project in order for it to succeed. And what I'm going to show you next is some Agile Governance techniques that address many of those points. So this is the bit that, you know, if you're not doing any of these next sections are areas where you can consider doing them tomorrow. Even if it's not at the start of a project, you've got a project in flight, you might find that actually some of these things may actually just help reset or just smooth out a few bumps the project is having. First thing to remember is every project is different. So take the time at some point, ideally at the beginning, if it's not, just go in and have a look again and look at tailoring your governance processes. So a couple of techniques that I like to do is, so as a regional director who's responsible for the governance of projects, before a project is starting, I will have a conversation with the project manager. And we will agree, and this is almost like we write it down, it's a contract as much for the project manager as it is for me. It works both ways. So what we do here is we just agree, how are we going to communicate? How often are we going to communicate? So in this particular scenario, this was a real scenario about 3 years ago. Someone pulled me up because I've said the word agile, was it this slide? Yeah, I've said agile ceremonies, and apparently agile ceremonies are not a thing anymore. So in this particular situation, the idea was, let's have a quick 2 or 3 minute call every day. If I'm about, I can attend the agile ceremonies, but I'm not allowed to, I'm not allowed to turn them into a status report to me. That was very important. If I've actually got something to say in the stand-up that supports the team and helps the project, then I can say it. If I don't, I've just got to stand there and actually listen. But it's very valuable to do so, doing that passively. We want to make sure that the project manager is in daily communication with the product owner. Again, that's always really important, because sometimes you find that product owners can be spread across multiple projects. They might not always be available or always empowered. So almost demanding or suggesting or making sure that we try and keep that up is very important. And here you can see in the first 4 weeks of the inception phase or the discovery phase, we're going to do RAG reports because there's a lot of uncertainty, there's a lot of risk. But actually we don't know if we want to do RAG reports after that inception phase at that point.
Could you define those two abbreviations?
Yeah. So a RAG report is a status report, red, amber, green. It's a fairly efficient way of reporting the status of particular things you care about. However, it is waste. It is muda. You know, if you don't need to write a report, why are you writing a report? So here, having that common sense to say, right, while it's quite risky and intense, we probably will do it, but we're actually going to revisit that intention after this high intensity discovery period. The ADRID is assumptions, decisions, risks, issues and dependencies. Some people call it RAID, have 2 Ds in there. So that's effectively a spreadsheet monitoring risks and issues. So an assumption map, I'm actually going to talk about assumption map soon. So what we're trying to say here is at the beginning of the project, this conversation takes 10 minutes and you've got the permission to revisit it. What I also like is this type of conversation the project manager then has with key members of the team or the team as well. So we look at that. Now, I've slightly obfuscated, I can't say that word. I blurred out a lot of the information because it's a real project. This is a roles and responsibilities exercise. Now, to make it a bit more fun, we did it in a restaurant. We did it in Zuhlke's. What we do here is we get people's job roles in the project and we put them along the top. Product owner, project manager, developer, tester, they go along the top. And then the post-it notes going all the way down, they are things or dependencies or work that the other team members need off that role in the project team. And this is something you can revisit multiple times. It might take about 2 or 3 hours, but actually do it with food. And actually revisit it, because project roles and responsibilities do change. Roles and responsibilities as a delivery director or someone responsible for delivery governance, I can tell you what I want to do, but I'd rather the team tell me what they want from me. I'd rather the team say what they want from the project manager. I'd rather the team say what they want from the person responsible for QA or DevOps. So what we're effectively doing here is we're co-authoring, co-creating each of our job roles within the project team. Because again, each project is different. You're not going to do the same thing every time. And I recommend actually revisiting this on several occasions. Get your governance highly visible. So who here has a task board, a scrum board, a Kanban board, whatever you want to call it, on their walls? Okay. So what you're doing there is you're making your plan very visible. You're making the work very visible. Who's got all their dirty risks on the wall? No. Why not? They're so important. The risks that the projects have, the assumptions that we're making, we should have them as visible as the work. Because if we don't, they're actually going to stop us. You don't want to hide your risks in a spreadsheet. So I did actually show you how to hide your risks in an ADRID spreadsheet. But what you get situated. Has anyone been in a risk review board or a risk review meeting? Yeah. So what's every 2 weeks you read a list of risks? No, that doesn't help. So here's a technique that I really like. I've stolen this from Jeff Gottel's Lean UX book. It's called assumption mapping. Can everyone hear me down here? Just to explain.
Yes, well, that's right.
So
We can hear you fine.
okay, just your ears at the back. Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay. So assumption mapping. What we do here is we look at the axes of urgency and uncertainty. So if something is uncertain and urgent as an assumption, it goes in this quadrant. And through exercises like user research or technical spikes, our job is to actually accept uncertainty, manage it, keep it visible, and move things down here, where it is both urgent and certain, or move it to this side of the quadrant where it's not really urgent. So this is at the start of an alpha, where we're dealing with uncertainty, we're managing it, we're embracing it, we're making it very visible. But this assumption map board stays in the project all the time. And what you see as we do technical spikes, as we do proving integration between multiple government departments, as we do user research, these tickets up here start to come down here and come down there. And what you're actually doing with this particular exercise is this actually becomes a prioritized product backlog in the top, where this is the most important thing, and we work our way down here. At the end of the alpha phase, we've created a product backlog of stuff that we know that we can build in priority order. So it's a very effective mechanism to keep your risks, keep your assumptions really, really visible. It doesn't replace your task board, but certainly it just keeps everything out in the open. Right. So I stole that from a book called Lean UX by Jeff Gottel. It's a fantastic tool. It's probably one of the most common exercises that I do. The thing that I really like it is it works in multidisciplinary teams. So if you're a technical architect and you care about interoperability, your risk is as important as the user researcher or the UX designer who's worried about, does this question work? As a team, you then decide where they go, but both of those risks are, there's no such thing as a wrong assumption. The way that Jeff actually shows it in the book, though, I've tweaked. So he has, instead of uncertainty, he uses the word risk. I didn't like that word because I found that the more senior stakeholders in the room were forcing the prioritisation on their perception of the word risk. If you use the word uncertainty, it just becomes a lot more inclusive. Another thing that we do is actually just get the state of the project really, really visible. So I've mentioned government digital services and the GDS service assessment several times. It's now got 14 standards. It previously had about 24. This was at a moment in time when there's 18. And what we have here is this is at the end of a discovery phase. The team wants to know what the governance of the project would look like, ready for the end of alpha assessment. So we want to be honest with ourselves, and this is, although the colours don't exactly match, this is effectively a red, amber, green traffic light system. So green means we as a team believe we've met it. Yellowy amber means this is in control and there's actions. On the back of each card there's actions. Red means, oh, we don't know. This is a risk. But actually having, at the end of a discovery phase, having red risks for the end of an alpha isn't a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if you kid yourself, that you hide it. If you make it visible and you work and it's right in your face, it becomes very important. The added bonus of those two highly visible things, going back to my too much governance, I don't have to ask anybody, I don't have to interrupt anybody, I just walk past the walls and I can see where the risks are. And rather than asking people what's happening, I can then go and say, well, how can I help? Governance needs to be really, really quick. You know, there's nothing more demoralising than risk review boards or, so actually what I find is, I'm going to put a bit of a hat tip to IBM have a governance process called the 7 Keys. And that can be a little bit convoluted, but you can really boil it down. So sometimes we still need to have conversations, but we want to have, so when I talk about a RAG report, a typical RAG report might have a red, amber, green status on these 7 sections. But that's still a lot of work. That's not all. Why have it on a spreadsheet? Why do I care that something was green 3 months ago? So the way myself and one of my colleagues, one of my mentors, we've evolved this into a very quick, almost 2 or 3 minute conversation. So we take the same principles and actually ask some key questions. So the person who I evolved this with, he started off, he was my boss, my mentor, and then he became my customer several times. So we would meet and say, are the team happy? That's the most important thing. Because if the team aren't happy, then there's probably other problems going on. But actually, we're changing the language a little bit. So the team is high performing. I don't like that high performing. I think it's a little bit, it's not particularly inclusive. So are the team happy? I like that. Work and schedule are predictable. Again, what does the current and next sprint look like? Is it known? Because if it isn't, then we need to be knowing why. So that's probably the next key question to ask. Are business benefits being realised? We change that to, are we meeting user needs? If we're doing user research, if we're building an MVP, do we know that we're actually building the right thing? Because if we don't know that, why are we continuing? So this is one of the things I hate, where you don't want to look at business benefit realisation after it's gone live. What can we actually do to find out as we're building stuff to make sure that we're meeting user needs? Stakeholders committed. I used to say, are stakeholders happy? But I put the word engaged there. For me, engaged means involved. Committed, not everyone is committed. Some people don't like projects going on. But I think for me is, are they engaged? Are they involved? Scope is realistic and managed. That's really important, but it's really understanding, is the backlog understood? Are the risks mitigated? Absolutely no, they're not. That's the wrong word. but are they clear, are they visible, are they understood? Some risks might appear. You don't want to say, if you run mitigating it straight away, you might not need to mitigate it straight. But I think just making sure they're clear and visible is very important. And just making sure business case and commercials are good as well. Right. Start a bit early. So, sharing is very, very important when it comes to governance. Very important. I think just working in the open just keeps you honest. Learning from other people's lessons is really good. Stopping people making the same mistakes is fantastic. So for me, working in the open, sharing is so important. And what we find is, there are so many different ways to do it. I'm actually doing it now. I'm sharing my experiences and hoping that they're helping you. But I'm not doing it because I'm narcissistic. I'm actually doing it to get some feedback. I find that I get a lot of conversations afterwards where people give me new ideas or qualify on some of the ideas I've had. So how you can do this? So for me, the best thing you can do is actually just, if you've got the concept of the task board, just make other work visible, get your assumptions visible, get your risks visible. Don't hide everything in Jira. Jira does not equal Agile. Jira's got a point, it's got a purpose. Having an electronic record, having audit traceability. Other tools are available. I personally prefer Trello, but actually getting stuff on the walls is just makes a difference. Communities of practice, that's so important for multidisciplinary delivery teams. If you're the only business analyst or delivery manager on a team with lots of engineers, you're going to need some of your own peers to talk to. So making sure you've got opportunity for talking to people in your own discipline is really important. Just having a lot of organisations, consultancies, customers, they all have some version of a Zuhlke day or a company day, or just a day where people can just come together and share their project experiences. Lightning talks. Does anyone know what a lightning talk is? They are so good. It's just, for me, lightning talks serve a lot of purpose. They are very quick and efficient and give people, 5-10 minutes to just say something really important and you learn. It's a very efficient way. And I really believe that helping people do public speaking and sharing is something very important. But this is actually scary as anything. So the giving people a very safe way, an early way, a quick way to do some public speaking is really good. I also like maybe have a water pistol handy just in case anyone talks too much. Because the whole point of a lightning talk is it's got to be quick. Brown bag sessions, they're very sort of embedded within Zuhlke culture. Every week we've got a remote brown bag where somebody's presenting something, and yeah, I think that's just the fact that it's happening all the time, it's self-organising. We can bring external customers into our office to see these, it's really good. Open show and tells, cross-project sharing, meetups, Leeds and Manchester, the North and Newcastle, they have very vibrant meetup scenes. It's very open, it's very sharing. London does as well, but I think London some of these can be a little bit diluted, but I think Leeds and Manchester are good. Obviously, blogs, conferences, and for me, something that's very important. Can I get a show of hands? Who here is somebody's mentor? A few people. So being a mentor is really, really valuable for the mentor themselves as well. So the book that I mentioned at the beginning, Turn the Ship Around, he actually references the concept of mentor-mentor, because mentoring can seem quite hierarchical. Someone's telling somebody this. But if you turn it into a mentor-mentor relationship, you're both learning. It's valuable to both of you. So I mentor about 3 or 4 people, but I get just as much back from them that they get from me. So empowerment. Now, in the book Turn the Ship Around, he quite rightly calls out how empowerment is actually the wrong word. If you empower somebody, if you give somebody permission to do something, you're not really empowering them, you're sort of telling them what to do. He uses the word emancipate, which I find a little bit inappropriate. I don't think it's the right word. However, I will use the words that he creates in the book, which is ensure a leader culture. The reason for that is people who are treated as followers rather than leaders have the expectations of followers. They act like followers, and as followers they have limited decision-making authority or ability, little incentive to give everything that they need to give. And it just dulls people's energy and passion if you treat someone as a follower. And where it gets worse is if people who are treated as followers become leaders, they then treat the next generation of followers badly. So what we want to do is we want to create a generation of leaders. And please read the book, Turn the Ship Around. It genuinely is inspirational. And for me, the most important thing, so I was really lucky. I was maybe one of the second or third waves of people to get the Scrum Master certification back in 2000 and early. And the inspirational lady that did my Scrum Master training was, I didn't call it certification, you see that, was a lady called Jean Baker. And I was a bit surprised, but almost within the first half hour of this 2-day course, she starts talking the importance of please do food, as a leader, do food. And I think this is very important to governance. The company that I used to work for, we grew about 400% in a short period of time. We used to do our governance in the pub, and the current managing director still looks fondly on the time, and I have to correct him when we meet, because he says, wasn't it great when we were small and we could do our governance in the pub on a Friday night? I said, no, because it was just me, you. You're only the people that became and went to the pub, got into this inner sanctum. It's not very inclusive. So for me, what I think is very important is, as a leader, create an inclusive environment that might be a lunchtime. Anyone here Swedish? Anyone know what fika is? Yes. So,
I can do
yes, yes. So in Sweden they have a part of their culture called fika where everyone just stops and has cake and coffee at 11 o'clock. Sort of like 11's is, but it genuinely happens. So create a culture. It doesn't have to be a restaurant, but don't make it in the pub. Don't make it in a place where it excludes people. But having a space where you can get together as a team and as a leader, sort of be accessible to everybody in the team, not just this hierarchy of me, the project manager, then the tech arc. So just create a culture where governance is inclusive, everybody has access to it. Any questions? So I think there's about...
Good 15 minutes, yeah. We have got benefit of 2 microphones. I'm going to take this opportunity to also introduce Imo. So, Imo, stand up. If you want to blame someone for the term software practice advancement, this is the guy. Having said that, reflect on it, and there are so many other terms flying around. And software practice advancement may be a mouthful, but it tells you what's on the tin. So in that respect, also thank you for the term. I'm recruiting him as one of my volunteers, so you are one of the mic bearers.
Okay.
And
Is this actually on?
yes, so for those using the mic.
Couldn't hear you still.
Oh, okay.
Oh yes, it's just, yeah, you have to speak really
Right.
fast. Okay.
So those using the mic, there is a red button. If you press and hold it, it will show on the display off or whatever the state is. And there is a button up here which will mute and unmute it.
Okay.
Any questions, anyone? So,
Yeah,
I'm making him run.
thank you. Thanks for a really good talk. It was really interesting. I had a question about, at the start you said there's some anti-governance patterns, one of which was kind of too much governance.
Yes.
And how do you strike a balance between all the suggestions that you've given and having too much governance?
Yeah. I think the key thing is to do the right governance at the right time. You know, where you can make it passive, make it visible, do it so you don't have to, you know, stop people, or create a culture where, you know, people are asking for help very early, or help is given proactively. So don't do it by multiple project managers interrupting people constantly and constantly. So yeah, the key thing as well is, also as I sort of mentioned as well, it's actually quite hard and every project is different. So the key thing is to actually agree with the team what is too much governance, what is just enough governance. So sit down with the team and find out. Any other questions?
I've got a suggestion for you.
Okay.
I've found that it's actually pathetically easy to generate an atmosphere in which people trust each other and also enjoy coming to governance activities. And you mentioned food, and that's really so good. And I mean, guys, this chap actually brought to our office a few weeks ago a lunch, you know, burnt supper basically, haggis, meats, haggis, a lot of whiskey. And that's such a good idea. Get people to bring something that they've made and the others can eat. And it generates such an atmosphere of mutual trust and collaboration.
Until they find out what haggis is.
It doesn't have to be haggis. But I have found that it's pathetically easy to attract people to meetings just by offering some cookies.
Or even don't make it a meeting, you know, just it's a conversation. It doesn't make it so it doesn't feel like a meeting is the key thing there.
Thank you. I totally agree with what you just said. How do you do that when you've got an offshore team involved?
That's really hard. A lot of the same principles apply. If you can afford it, I would try and get some face-to-face time at the beginning or on regular occasions and have a lot of those same conversations. So the key risks, you know, can be harder to see because it's out of sight, out of mind. For me, it's also how you design your offshore as well. You know, is it completely offshore? Is it a mixed team with dev capacity, part of a team? The key thing is, I think you do need a little bit of face time. You know, or even doing some of these exercises where you could do that roles and responsibilities as a WebEx quite easily. As long as you're doing things like daily stand-ups remotely, there's no reason why you can't do them. Retrospectives, there's so many. Has anyone heard of Innovation Games? It's a website called Innovation Games that gives you all these fun ideas to do remote retrospectives. Yeah, what's that, sorry?
Is it Luke Holmes?
I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, there's a book about it. So I have it on another slide actually. So yes, I think instill an open culture, and if you've got an offshore team, just get that offshore team collaborating in a way and defining the governance that suits everyone, really. So there's nothing stopping you doing the expectation exchange contract with the person in charge of delivery. Actually, it's probably more important to do that roles and responsibilities. You can do that. Find a way of actually sharing the risks and assumptions. You're probably using a remote task board and everyone can see. Where you get challenges, I found, is where the interactions are not always clear to everyone. So, you know, where the customer might go direct to the delivery team and ask them to do stuff. There you have other challenges to worry about there. But again, build trust, and if you can afford to, go and see them.
Something that's worked in the teams I've worked is a combination of regular face-to-face video conferencing, and if you have a television suite, that's even better. But also the ambassador pattern, where a member of the team goes across for 2 or 3 weeks and joins the other team. You know, just aid that information exchange.
Okay.
One other point, what I have found useful. So, very early on, I used to lead a design team, which worked all across the world. And there it helped for the design team to spend some time together as part of getting to know. And I have found that useful even now, in that I'm often based up here in the north. The power is all down in London, and I'm involved with a lot of things in London. But once you get to know the people reasonably well during the first 2-3 meetings, after that you can do a lot of stuff remotely. And thirdly, have some common shared experience. So burnt supper may not work, but share a movie if you can online or something of that nature. And as we move towards increasing physical borders kind of situation, but where there is a healthy respect for intellectual property and intelligence generally, it's going to be more and more the norm that people meet virtually. So watch this space.
Okay. Any other questions?
I work in a culture where there's a delivery team where, let's say, 3/4 or more of the team are very on board with collaborating for governance. But we've got a few members of staff who are quite resistant to change, let's say, and are quite comfortable with having governance inflicted upon them.
Yeah.
This is, no shade on what you've done here, but this is brilliant for people who want to make those changes. How would you go about changing the attitudes, or at least encouraging different attitudes for people who don't want to change?
So the best thing you can do is bring people on that journey and just make them realise how you can do it. The experience, the scars, the wounds, the pain has come from working around those sort of people, bypassing those people, but by default you always want to bring people along with you. One thing we did that was actually really effective is there was one customer had a change control board. It was the CCB. It would meet once a month only. They would not meet any quicker than that. So we created a digital change control board that would meet on demand. So actually we invented a new process. Their process actually still stayed, and it still was a change control board for non-digital projects, whatever they were. So in this particular case, and then after about 6 months, everyone realised this is silly, and the change control board happened weekly. So it was sort of over time, it was a bit hearts and minds, but we didn't stop and just let those people win. We worked around them and brought them in for that particular way. What you might find is just trying to be sort of collaborative, use retrospectives and future perspectives to try and bring people on board, tell people they're actually designing the new version of, if you inflict it upon them, resistance to change, bring them into the room and ask them to design what it should look like with these parameters, then that will make a difference. So again, I think the key thing here is inflicted upon those people. You say that they're not the most forward thinking or they might be resistant, then they will dig their heels in if you just keep telling them what to do. Try and work out a way of getting them to be involved and participate and collaborate in that particular one. One of our customers at the moment, they've got a new way of deploying software. Multiple teams can deploy software, brand new tooling, and what they're actually doing, they're basically giving people permission to play for a little bit. Play, learn, sense, adapt, and actually, as we learn this new process and tools, you will all effectively start firming up the governance around being able to deploy. And they're doing it in sort of test environments before it goes near live.
Would anyone here like to hear lightning talk about future perspectives? That's a new term on me.
Yeah, have you not heard of future? We call them future perspectives or pre-mortems. So it's effectively, rather than say what went well, what didn't go so well, any ideas, you say, you do it at the start of a project and you say things like, well, where are we now? just get level, get your baseline, and then you say, where do we want to be at X? It might be at the end of a project, at the MVP, it might be in a year's time. So where are you now, where do you want to be? And then you ask yourselves 2 more questions. We will be a success if, and we will have failed if. And then you work out, how you're going to how to be a success and failure. That might be a great technique to bring people in. And actually, collaboratively, if they can see that the team will fail if you keep doing what you're doing, it becomes quite obvious. And if you do it in a safe way where people aren't feeling sort of picked upon, or then it can help. Any other questions?
To ask a question. It might be a difficult one, so I don't know whether it will be a difficult one. What are the 3 most difficult things you found about governance, trying to do good governance in Agile projects?
People, people, and people.
And is that people, like the roles that people have, or?
I think it's the gentleman here. There's people who are feared, who fear for their job. I think that's probably people who fear that their ability is being sort of diminished or not as valued and that's really sort of something as a consultant, but also in Agile delivery where you're working alongside heritage teams or legacy teams. You don't want to be the annoying cool kids. You want to actually bring people on that journey with you. So I think bringing really clever subject domain experts on involved, and it comes back to that inclusion, bringing people into the decision making. But all of those anti-patterns, they come out with almost people protecting their job, protecting a way of working, protecting what they're comfortable and what they know.
Okay, thank you.
I can slightly add to that point again. This becomes extremely extreme in a way when there are lots of contractors. Contractors are supposed to, by the powers to be, to know everything, bring their kit in, and we are just paying you and you do everything else. And that kind of thinking is always disastrous for programs. So built-in time into forming the team and keep forming the team, because the team is going to change. And built-in time into training and educating and helping people with their weak points, let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Because all of us have weak points. And so long as we manage and work on them as a team, the team is more likely to succeed.
Yeah. And this comes back to the sharing as well. So one of the things I love about Leeds is I've worked with NHS Digital, NHS England, DWP, and the fact that I see those people, not at things like this necessarily, but just doing their own, let's meet up and share some, who's using GDS Verify or Notify, just getting together. And I think that sort of cross-organisation sharing is really, really important as well.